Okay, hi guys, welcome. My name is Liesl from Artist Palette, and we are doing the festive wreaths today. We can make it fun and your own if you want to add different things in, do different types of trees, or maybe put a house in instead. So there are other options you can do, and you can also just show it on our Facebook page and show your results, your interpretation, and how you made it your own. So I have my supplies here, so I'm going to put my paint there so you can see. I always use the basics, and if you have a premixed brown that you'd rather use or any greens, you can always use those. So a raw umber, burnt umber are good, burnt sienna, but we are going to mix brown together. I have my black, white, bright yellow, phthalo blue, bright red, which are basically the primary colors that you can get at really any store. And I have my water cup, some paper towel on the side, and then for brushes, you can use any large brush that you want to. So I have like a large kind of round brush here. I'm just going to use it for more background. I'm not going to paint in the center where my wreath is sitting. And I have a detailed brush. And you can use any medium flat brush that you prefer. So something like that. This one's a little bit larger, but you can use something a bit smaller too. I like a flat kind of bright brush. And that's really all I use for this one. And feel free to use other brushes that you like. Okay, so you can pause, take your time throughout this video. And I'm going to start with my very large brush here. This is a 16 by 20 canvas, a little bit larger than what I normally use. But I happen to have that, so I'm going to use it. And you can use something smaller. So the very first thing I start with is just a very light brown to circle around kind of where my wreath is going to sit, and then I fill in my background around that circle. So you can actually use a plate or something like that to put this in where you're not going to be painting inside it. So I want a little bit higher up on the just a tiny bit higher up on the canvas, so I have room for my bow. It's going to drape down just a little bit. And to make your brown, you're going to take equal parts yellow and red, depending on how you want your brown to look. If you do a little bit more red, it's going to be more of a red brown. If you put more yellow, it's going to look a little bit more yellowy brown. Then I'm going to take a little piece size of black. So this is going to make it really dark. And then I'm going to take 2 piece sizes or something like that of white. Yeah, so about 2 piece sizes of white. You can see it's a little bit of a lighter brown. It's still pretty dark. So this is actually really good for that kind of all the twigs and stuff that are just going around on that side. I'm going to place this, just go around like that. So this is actually, this circle is a little tiny bit smaller than what I intend the wreath size to be, but this is a good base. Like, it's a little bit smaller is okay. And now I can use this for my mixing palette. So this is where I'm not putting anything in. This is going to be the center, and I'm going to make my wreath bigger by going outside of this. So I'm going to build on it going outside the circle, not within the circle. So hopefully that makes sense. And from here, touch of water, big scoop of white. I'm actually just using whatever's left on my brush. And grab some more of my brown, my dark brown. Big scoop of white, a little bit more of the brown. You can use this very light color. You can use different browns. If I add a touch more black, you can get it more grayish brown, because black makes more of a gray color. And you can just build off of that and get some different browns going in your background. You'll notice I have a lot of streaks of color because it's a big brush. It's holding a lot of different paint colors. So that is why it is going into all this multicolored look, which I'm just going to let it be. I don't really care about that. I think it looks kind of cool. But sometimes I'm just going to take a little dip of water, more white, another little scoop, and you can get some lighter streaks in here. Water. And I added a dot more of my black. I just go up and down. It's very continuous. A little bit more white and put in some more of these streaks. Because if I just use white, oh, there was really a lot of red and orange and yellow in this brush. I'm going to wash it off because this is holding a lot more paint than I expected it to. All right, let's grab a little bit of brown, some white, and some of that black again. Gives it a bit of a gray because I did go a tiny bit more grayish in that one. But do your favorite. Do what you think speaks to you. Looks good hanging up on your wall. Yeah, I'm not going in the circle, I'm just going up and touching the circle. And from here you can add streaks of different things. If you want to put more darker or lighter brown, you want to put some gray in. If you want to change it up and put a bit more of a gray tone, so just white, little touch of black. You can put, see how it's more gray? You'll put that in. You can do more of a gray background. You can take more of a dark brown, so equal parts yellow, red, and black. Not equal parts with the black, just a little bit less of the black because it's very powerful, but equal parts red and yellow, and then a dot or two of black. And you can get a darker brown again. You can just very lightly kind of glaze over certain spots to give it more of a rustic look. You just don't press as hard, and you kind of just stop around wherever. You don't go all the way up, and you just get these different streaks. That's very choppy looking. Press very light. Yeah, so that you can make it more rustic that way. You can do the same thing with just white. You can wait for it to dry and add in the white, but you can wash off your brush, dry it really well. I'll just show you a little example before I move on to making the wreath. Wash it off, dry it. Just take a little bit of white on your brush. See, a little bit more lightly coated. And again, just press very light. If it's still very super wet, if it's still pretty wet, then come back when it's a bit more dry so you can do this a lot easier, because it might be harder to do while you got a lot of paint on your canvas and it's not showing very well. So you can see I just very lightly press, hardly press onto the canvas, and you get all of these broken up lines. Yep, there's an idea for the background. Okay. And you can pull off paint just by washing off the brush or taking a dry brush, and you can pick up some paint by just going over it with nothing on it. That's really what it is. It's just nothing on it. And just picking up thick paint or blending things that you think you want to blend. I didn't really blend. I just like picking up extra paint that I don't really need. All right. So our next step is to, you can let it dry, you can blow dry it, but I don't really need to. I'm going to take my dark brown again. So like this, probably add a touch more black. I like it really dark chestnut brown. And start making more of the shape of the wreath so that you can see all those twigs and little branches intertwining. And then we'll put in some green around. All right, so I'm going to go a little bit closer to start that wreath. Okay. Now, I am using a flat brush, but you can switch to a detailed brush or a smaller kind of pointy round brush. And going back into the color, well, let's just mix it again. Let's take equal parts red and yellow again. Then a couple dabs of black. And that's basically how I'm going to leave it. You can add a little bit more yellow if you think it's a bit too red. You can add a little touch of white to give it a little bit more brightness if it's just a little too dark for your liking. I kind of like it dark. Let's add a little bit of white. There, you can see a bit of that color, nice dark brown. Touch of water. And remember when I said we're trying not to go in here too much. I'm going to just do some, I'm not going in a circle. I'm going to color it in with like a light blue and into a white. But let's just get towards the outside. We'll add in some stuff on top, but let's just get some intertwining. Just build onto it so you can see how it's starting to form. And I just I don't mind pressing pretty hard. And I'm only going like halfway across. Sometimes you can have some more jagged lines because they're not all perfectly rounded. Sometimes it's got more of like a harsher bend to it instead of soft. There. And when you have a lot going on here, there's not a lot of gaps, you can see that there's a lot going into the wreath. And I sometimes just let it end without it continuing. See how you can have it sometimes just ending in different directions, not all just the same way. So that's up to you if you want to go and end them all facing one way or if you want some overlap going different ways. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. I'm going to add some into the circle. And you know what, if you're just kind of watching before you tackle, you can fill in the circle light blue first. That can be done. Then I'm going to take a little bit of blue and probably equal parts blue and white. A little bit more white. So I'm going to start with this. I'm going to go just around the side. I am going right up to that brown, by the way. I say be very careful because if your brown is really wet and you're touching wet brown, you might not like the results. It will turn very greenish brown. So I just went around like just a ring. Then whatever's on my brush, I'm just going to take a dip of water, big scoop of white now, and just mix it kind of by itself, or use a dot of your blue. If you have a lot of blue in your brush, try to maybe wash it off and just take some white with a dot of your blue, but see how it's much lighter. Go around that. And there's different ways you can do this. There's different variations. Like you can just do different colors, more darker blue, stuff like that. I'm going to wash this off. And now from here, I just take white. Wash it off really well. Dab it dry. Take a big scoop. You can take dirty white, contaminated white. Start more in the center. See, that's contaminated white, so it's got this like light hue of blue. And you can use a big brush. You can switch to the big brush if your little brush or whatever brush you're using is a bit too small. And go out towards the side. Just go right over top. Go towards the edge. But start from the middle outwards because that's where it's the lightest. See, it's the lightest in here. And then drag it out as much as you want. There we go. And I think I'll wash that off. Now if you want to add a moon, you can. If you want to, like in here, you want to add a little bit of a moon, you can certainly do that with your detailed brush. Just go back to one of the lighter blues we did around here, and you can just make a bit of a moon. Kind of like a crescent, whatever you feel like doing. You can opt out on this. It's one of those things that's like, maybe you don't want to add it in. It's kind of distracting. I think I added a very faint moon. Okay, super light. Not as dark. There. Okay, and from here, I will go back to my dark brown. Using the same medium brush for now. Just go around the side, like right here. Just imagine there's like this kind of, almost like this backbone for holding it together. It doesn't just stop. A branch keeping the greenery together on the side. And you can add in, you can switch your detail brush, whatever is easiest. You can add in some little twigs coming in here. Like a couple, maybe 2 or 3. Just a couple little twigs in there, because now it's not as perfect. There we go. So I'm going to add a bit more twigs afterwards. Maybe at the end. Maybe I'll just put a couple here for reference, but maybe at the end I can always add a bit more with my detailed brush at the very end for some final touches. That's always nice. Okay. So you can see a little bit more. The moon, just a very light blue right on top. Optional, you can leave it out. It's like kind of interrupts everything going on, but that's preference. And the good thing is that white can get rid of anything that you don't really like. If you want to get rid of it with some more white, you certainly can. I'm just going to leave the moon in and see how it ends up later. Okay, so now moving on to some green for the other side of the wreath. I'm going to start with, I actually don't mind that it's wet. I'm going to take into my light blue, just going to add in equal parts yellow and blue. So it kind of looks like a, close to a Viridian forest green. Pretty dark, so a little bit more on the blue side because blue is more powerful and darker than yellow. I'm going to take a little, just a little dab or two of the brown, just a tiny bit. And let's start with a little pea size of white. There. So it's like an evergreen. And then touch of water. So from here, I'm going to imagine that a lot of it's coming from right in the center here. So I just put this little dot here. And I'm just kind of flicking it a lot. And it's not like twigs. For the most part, it's like you're making little pine needles. So you can have little pine needles in here, kind of just flicking out and down. Think almost like you know when you're making a palm tree leaves, but maybe not as soft. So this, when I get to the halfway point, I'm going to start flicking them the other way. So like it's parting, it's going the other way. Going basically into the center, even though I know I have a bow here. That's okay. Just be pretty generous. We don't want it to be lacking. We want it to have good base coat going. You can do some longer ones. See some longer ones. This is just one color. We haven't done any lighter colors yet, or darker colors. You can have some of it folding over to the side. I like to have a little bit come up this way. I'm slightly pressing and flicking it up and out. And I'm going to do the other side maybe. So on the other side, it's like you're making, let me just pull this down. Up and out like that. So it's like you have a little branch coming out. So you can make one of those pine needle branches, little short lines. You can have some longer ones. I just kept it a little bit different altogether. And for the most part, it's pretty filled in over here. I'm going to go back in with brown later and get more of that branch kind of showing through in the middle. Let's start switching a little bit of our color. So I don't really need to wash off the brush. I can just take a bit more extra black and maybe a little bit extra yellow. I have a really dark green here. And I'm going to use this and add some in. And I just keep reminding, but switch to a smaller brush if this one's difficult to work with. Just go pretty much right over top in between, breaking up some of this green. Give it a little extra shadow. So more depth in between it all. And probably the center is a really good idea because, so like right in the middle here, probably where it's the darkest, where there's a lot of creases and concentration of the pine needles sticking out in the leaves. That already made a big difference just by adding that. And I just wash this off for now. So while that's just drying for a minute, now you just use my detailed brush and just go back to more of a lighter brown just to add in for some highlights. And that really what I do into the brown is I add more yellow and white. So it's, see like that super yellowy light brown? So if you make your brown again, just after you've made your brown, just add more yellow and white to it. You can also use kind of like a yellow ochre color if you have that pre-mixed color. See, I'm going to pick and choose some little twigs and branches or just make up new ones to give it a little pop of highlight. It can come into here too, it's okay. And you pick some stand out more than others, and it looks like you have lots of layering now. And I really didn't try that hard. Okay, so that's just a little bit of highlight added in, and you can add more at the end. And you can see I just picked different spots so that there's still some of that dark brown showing. And on top of this, it's pretty nice to just use black, just straight black, and not really going over top of the yellow. You're just going on, like underneath it or around it to help pop out some of the shadow in between. So it looks like the highlight is just on top or around some of this black. Try to keep it minimal. You can just add more black, by the way, to your brown. So you're not just using straight black if your brown's a little bit lighter. And I just like to add in a few little pieces coming in here because that's where it's getting into the darker, more crease spot. Felt like it made a lot of sense to put some in there. Okay, so there's some of that. And feel free to take in the brown that you've been using before and pick up certain colors that are a bit too much for you. You went really thick with some color and you want to tone it down, just go back to a bit of your regular mixed brown, whatever brown you had, and you can pick up some of this and tone it down. You can just go over some spots and it's no longer super obvious. Yeah. Still a pretty good shadow. All right. Okay, so back to my highlights in the green. I want to do a highlight now in the green area. Let's just take another scoop. I can take dirty yellow, so contaminated yellow. And another little scoop of white. So that's one way to make a lighter green. It's kind of muddied, and I actually like the muddied look just because, see, it's more muted in tone. It's not too vibrant. And I'll show you some highlights with some bright yellow as well. So very, very vibrant, but it's just minimal. And you can play around with your greens. You can do different highlights of green. You can just make a fresh green with no black if you want a super vibrant light green in there. And then just randomly place it, break up some of this color. Now I got a lot going on. It's pretty cool. Maybe I'll add a few more. You can add some squiggly lines instead of it being all perfectly straight, kind of like the brown over here. Just with the light color, I think is good because it's not, you do a dark color, your eye is drawn to it outside of it, but if it's light, it's just subtle over on the sides, right? So just a little bit there, there. Okay, so I washed that off, and I'm going to now put in just a little bit of my dark brown again. So I'm just taking in from the beginning. Remember that dark brown that we had when we put it initially on that side? All of the stuff. I'm going to take a little bit of that. Use my medium brush again. And I am placing in a few of these pieces that we've made before, following it into the middle of some of my greenery, so it looks like it's the actual brown branch following in and holding the leaves together. Maybe see if I have a little branch coming up this way, a couple little dabs in there. And you know what, you can add more little twigs. I would say your detailed brush is probably a really good idea. Just a couple twigs coming out. twigs like that. Anywhere you want to put the twigs. Just remember a detailed brush. I warned you if you don't like, sometimes if you turn it the wrong way, it makes this really thick line with a flat brush like this. All right, there. You just final little details. I like it's fun. It's kind of whimsical if you like that type of thing. And you can keep it more simple. You don't have to add leaves really on top of this. But of course I went pretty fancy. Kind of looks a bit like holly in some of the little branches and stuff in here. But let me just show you with some yellow and white. So if you just take like equal parts yellow and white, I'm just using a detailed brush, you can get little highlights. Pick and choose. Like say maybe coming in from the center here, that's kind of folding in, or up here. But just a few, just to highlight certain spots that you think is hitting more of the light, that would look a little bit brighter. There, so just a few. And these are just a few twigs that I'm just building off of. And I just let my wrists do the work. I can get some fun little tiny twigs that are a little bit loose. Just breaks up all of that perfectness here. It just gives it some different type of feel. And I'm just touching up into the darkness right here where it's binding the leaves together. Okay. All right. So you can blow dry your painting if you want to do that. I just I'm going to use my medium brush for the next step, and I'm going to use some white, and I don't mind it being slightly contaminated because I don't like things perfectly white. It's not very natural. So even if it's got a little bit of color or some like black to tone it down slightly, only a dot is good. That's personally, I like that. So we'll start with some of the bits of berries and some white little snow that's kind of sitting on it. If you don't want to do that, you can skip right ahead into the trees that we're putting in here and Snowman. Actually, let's do that first so that we can get that, and then you can decide if you want to add snow and some berries, and we'll put in at the very last the bow when everything's done. All right, so we're going to go much closer for the middle and get that done, and then we can put in all the snow and the berries I was talking about. And then afterwards it should be fairly dry, or like just make sure that you're happy and it's all dry. Then we're going to put the bow right on top. So for the trees, I kept it kind of fun and pretty simple. You can start with your detailed brush, but if you have a nice flat brush like this, even smaller than this is probably good. We're going to take a super dark, actually we're going to start with a regular green. I just realized I started with a lighter green and then I added the darkness on top. So 2 parts yellow, 1 part blue, little piece size of white. I'm not picky on color. I don't think you should be either. You can start with that. If you want to already give it a toned down look, you can add a dot of black or two if you like those looks. And then on the side, whoops, on the side, I'm just going to make like 3 trees. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and then a gap 3. So after this, it's kind of important that you're starting with more of a detailed brush. So if I, it's kind of crazy upstairs. Geez, it's hard to think sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to lightly just press up and flick out. Up, flick out, and you can just start dabbing on the way down. Just on each tree, I'm going to do this. I just use whatever's on my brush, as you can see. See how there's one little middle point sticking up at the top? A bit more of that high peak. And then after this, I'm going to use my flat brush. I'm just going to dab and point it up on an angle. Just make sure you fill in the middle of your tree. And go a little bit wider. Extend them a little bit more at the bottom and a little bit less towards the top. So at the top, I'm just leaving it pretty much alone. There. Fill in a bit of that middle. I don't really want gaps in the middle. And then a little bit more. Sometimes you can use the corner of your brush if it's a bit too long. But I like to use the full length of it, especially at the bottom, so I get more of that length going through. And I am just letting it overlap. Light taps with just the tip of the brush, and you get that nice spongy kind of leafy look. Alright, and then let's just do the side. Again, I'm just starting a little bit with the corner. You can get some thinner branches sticking out, and then you can use the full length at the bottom. And once you're happy with the length that you have, I'm going to go a little bit more on this side. You know, it's a taller tree, it just seems like it would stick out a tiny bit more. Now I can put in some darkness on top. I'll wash this off. And I can just add a little piece size into my green of black. So it's just going to look black basically. Yeah. It's going to look pretty much just black. Super, super dark. And then if you want to start with your detail brush again, feel free to do that. Just wiping off a little extra paint. Just following it mostly. You don't have to go right to the edge. So I have a little bit of that lighter green showing through along the edges that are sticking out on the sides. But when I go to each side, when I go in the middle, I'm just making sure it's all pretty much filled in right into the middle. So a lot of it is filled in, except for the very ends. You can see some of that green shining through. Okay, cool. So I'm going to add more in the middle here. You see, I'm just mostly using the corner of my brush, which is why I can get away with doing that. And then press a bit harder, use more of the full width of my brush when I get towards the bottom. And look at that. It looks like there's a lot of depth into these little trees here. Pretty cool. Fill in the middle, that's what's important. Just keep following the groove. If they're sticking out on one way, you want to go that same direction. And just keep dabbing. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's good. And I'm going to leave it. While we're doing the snow everywhere else, I will add the snow on the trees, and I can show you just how easy that is too, because it's the same technique except less overall. And with my detail brush, now I can make my snowman. The snowman, of course, white, but I outline with some blue. So some light blue, not just blue, but light blue. And it's probably a good idea to first maybe start with white for you, but I'm going to start with a light blue first, and then I will fill it in with white because you can see it better that way. So a big scoop of white, just a little dot or two of blue. And I'm going to start with, let's just do the bottom first. Do a big circle here. And sometimes, you know, the circles are not so circular. Sometimes they're a little bit flattened because of the weight of the snow. It's just, we know that look, right? It's not as perfect in circles because of the weight of the snow kind of pressing down. And then from the next layer, so it's kind of flat here where it connects into a smaller sort of circle. And then the head, I just went a little bit, just attached it here, I just went a little bit smaller and then kind of went a little bit further back. You know, it really depends on the look that you're going for. I try to give it some more movement is all. More animated look. So I'm just washing this off and taking pure white and then filling it in, because I can just fill it in from the center, go towards the edge, fill that in, picks up a lot of that blue. And I like to, where it connects from the head into the body, just kind of fill that in as well. And not leave too much thickness of the blue showing. You can fill it more in between some of these lines here, so there's not much of a big noticeable crease. So it's a bit more merged together, you know, it's a bit more melted together in a way, kind of more packed in, merged together. Yeah, just in between the layers of the bodies, kind of in the center, they're a bit more merged together. There. So what's going to bring this out a little bit more is, of course, taking black for the hat. Then towards the back, I didn't just go straight on. I kind of went a little bit around, so I kind of curved it from towards the back, overlapped just a little bit of that head, the top part of the head, not too much. It's going right over top. Curved, see, it's just that curved line, it's not a straight line. And then you're going to make the top hat just a little band is what I'm going to call it. Just a band going around. And a little bit of a thicker line. That's going to be more of the tip of the hat. And then just a little bit in more. Just going back, but kind of not too far back. And just a little curve at the top. There. Alright, so what's helpful for the rest of the stuff, the features besides the nose, is taking the back handle of one of your smaller brushes and poking for, say, 2 eyes. Let's start with the button so you can see how big it goes. Poke. Make it. I like to go in like a rounded position instead of straight, because it gives it more of that, again, that 3D look and a bit more of a realistic type of vibe, as if it was flowing down in a curved way. eyes, I'm not placing it absolutely center. I'm actually putting one just below here, and then there. See, there's a little bit of like space for the back of the head showing, and then you can, and towards the bottom, just make a bit of a mouth. And then we can put the nose, which will really bring it together. But before I put that nose, I definitely want to put in the arms. So that's one of the first things that I think before I do the arms with brown. If you have leftover dark brown, excellent, just use the same one. But when you take just regular blue, you can just see right in, like right on the sides here, you can give it more of that, it's a little bit of an outline, and on the edge of the face here, but not in the middle. Okay. And then you can take, if you want to, you can take a little bit of white and just go along the rim of that top hat right here. A little swipe at the top and that second little layer down here. Just separate that from the rest of the hat. Optional. I think it's kind of a nice little touch. So arms, take your dark brown, equal parts yellow, red, and a couple dots or two of black. I'm not really picky on the color, as long as it's some sort of brown. You can go super dark, you can even just do black. Okay, so with the angle that we have here, I'm going up, so from the body, the edge of the body, I'm going to go a little bit lower, not around the neck area, so just a tiny bit lower, kind of in line with that first button, and then just go a little bit up. And you know, this is a branch. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like it's hard to make a snowman with a perfect branch, right? But you can sort of mimic the shape of the arms, just up and then kind of do a bit of like an obtuse angle, very wide, like this, and then just make a few branches, right, kind of coming out. Cool. Be very careful that you don't make it look like it's doing some weird hand gesture by accident. Okay, so the other side, the arm is actually, you can see it in here. It's just, you can see the side of the body more, so it's definitely coming in from inside the snowball. And it's just coming out, doing some branches here. There. Happy snowman. And then now we can do the carrot nose. Perfect. You can probably just make a carrot nose from your light yellow. Remember that white and yellow? And then piece size of red, maybe just a little bit less because red is much darker. There we go, we have like a orange. You can do a red orange if you want it more noticeable. So I'm going to, we have to remember, it's important to keep right in between the eyes, press, and up on an angle, thin. You can do like an Olaf thing if you want to, but there. It's like really close to touching the eye, like the very far left eye. But you can just take a little bit of black and just give it more of an outline at that very bottom. Keep it a bit more defined, I guess. There. Got a bit of a nose. There we go. So we have our snowman here. Now from here, I'm going to start adding in my berries and the snow on the wreath on the outside. So let's pull this out. And what I did for this step was going back to the medium brush, like I said, just kind of with the tip only, just kind of dunk it in with the tip. And then we're going to follow wherever you want it to sit, sort of thing. It's kind of like stuck in between some of the leaves that you got going. But one thing that you can do beforehand is if you want to add some more leaves, this is optional by the way, just take equal parts blue and yellow. Nothing else after that. So something nice and forest, like kind of a bluish teal sort of green. Haven't used a lot of that. You can follow some of these brown little twigs. You just lightly tap around to give it some smaller little leafy bits. So you can do that. You can see if you like it first before you add it in. On each side is like light little taps, kind of like little soft commas, maybe a little bit less and smaller towards the bottom of the twig. Kind of cool. I think it adds a different element to it instead of all the same type of strokes. More of like a dotted look. And don't forget you can add some in here too. So you can have like a little twig come in, just lightly tap on the sides, little dots close to the little branch coming out. So that's all I did, just little blobs, dots, nothing perfect, and it kind of comes together in just a little bit less and smaller towards the ends. I think it helps with the whole look that it brings. Now with the berries, I kind of added that in after I did the snow, so let's show you what I did with the snow here. So just tap like this, and for the most part that's all I did. You can use a large brush for this part to get more kind of, I guess, thicker ones. Take a little bit more again. Just tap with the tip of the brush. And you can follow certain directions that some of your leaves are going. So it's like it's sitting on top of, if I follow just like a specific leaf or some leaves, see how they're flowing in this way? It looks like they're sitting on the leaves and it's a bit more frosted. If I touched a little bit of green, I just wash it off, take some more white. I just follow the same direction of these leaves up here. It looks like there's some snow and frosting on there. Okay, so there's more of a snowy look. You can add a lot more, by the way, if you think you're kind of having fun with this type of look. You can put some more onto the brown. So you know, brown, follow a bit more of like a twig and its little curvature. There. Now, if you don't really care for it, just, you know, put some more green on top, get rid of it, go back to some brown. So if I just lightly kind of dab and put some more flicks on top, for example, you can tone down things that aren't particularly my taste, and then you can leave it looking more kind of like a highlight, I guess, or just a subtle type of frosted look. And same with here. Just go back over, tone it down. And then that would be that. So with the red berries, I used a bigger brush, dipped in the red, and just dabbed randomly throughout these green areas. I didn't really just poke all over the place like polka dots. I kind of did it with some purpose. So maybe if I had berries, they would collect together, and then I would leave a little gap and maybe start somewhere else, put a few more berries along a vine somewhere. Maybe right here. There's some berries coming out over here. Switch to my largest brush and do some bigger berries. Maybe some through here. These down here. Circling some of them, you can make some actually a lot bigger. There, you get different sizes. Pretty cool. Overlap is totally okay as well. I like it a bit more randomized so that it's a more natural in nature type of feel instead of a little bit too perfectly aligned or spaced out. All right. So let's put some snow on the trees. Hopefully they're dry. And then we will start the ribbon, nice little bow down here, if you want to start that. So whenever you're ready, I'm just giving myself a little bit more white here. Whenever you're ready, we'll start the bow, but let me just do the white on the trees. So I'm just using a little bit less paint. Find when you have too much paint, it comes off really, really thick. I just go on each side. There. A little bit of paint, slightly tap. Don't forget to do some overlap. And on each side. You can do a little bit in the middle if you want more of a snowy look. There we go. Then I have snowy trees. And you can always put more layers of snow in. Yeah, just leaving some gaps in between some of the layers so some of that green is still showing. And this is just some brown, adding just a little bit into the side. All right, so let's do that bow. We do have to start with a bit of a lighter color, kind of like a pink. So we can get a hot pink going, and then we'll put in, when it's dry, we'll put in the actual deep red. I'll show you that color. All right, so to get this going for that bow, let's go closer again. Now you can use a smaller round brush. I think I'll just use a smaller round brush for now. It's kind of similar to a deep detail brush. I'm going to take mostly red, just a little touch of white and yellow. See how it's kind of like a hot pink, and it can be kind of salmon looking, it can be almost coral looking. So that's what I'm starting with before I do actual red. If you try to take just red, put over top it, and it's not a thick paint that's going to cover it, you'll notice that it's going to frustrate you and be, yeah, it's just super transparent. You're not going to get that red color. Okay. So I'm going to imagine this is wrapped around the middle of the wreath. So somewhere around here, seems like it's in between this area. I just start with that, so that little loop going around, nice and rounded. That's what I want. And then from here, towards the top, I'm going to just do some sort of, see, it's going really wide out. It's going out, it's got some little bumps into it, so I'm going to also, from this bottom, I'm just going to loop it around, make it look like not a perfect bow. It's got some creases and stuff going through it. Just fill it in, nice and thick with the first coat. I mean, not super thick paint where it's going to take forever to dry, but a good layer. Just following the groove, following it from here outwards. There, and it covers the background pretty well. Especially when we do our next coat, we're definitely not going to see the background. And then the same on the other side. Just a couple little loops from here, bring it down, loop it around. And just fill that in. You notice that if you don't have enough white, it's super transparent. So just add a little extra if you're having a hard time getting it filled in. So if I add a little bit more white, I can get it going and covering the background. See, it just really does help. And then the bottom. So we got that little draping from the end of the ribbon. And then from the middle, so we have this here. From the middle, let's just imagine it's being parted. So right from this towards the side, I'm just going to do a little bit of a flick coming down. And it can just, you know when like you have a ribbon and the end is kind of cut on an angle, right? You can do it cut on an angle. You can do a second piece, a couple little pieces that you made into a ribbon. And I just made it a little bit wider towards the top, so it wasn't as thin. Thinner at the bottom. And let's do the other side. So same type of thing, kind of symmetrical, but not overly. Made it thicker up here, just kind of two little pieces parting. And let that dry. And then we will, when it's fully dry, we're going to add lots of dark shadows, creases, highlights, and the actual red color we intend it to be. So while we're waiting for that bow to dry just a little bit longer, some things you can add for fun. If you wanted to add more snow, that was a thing, right? But you can just dot in some actual pieces of snow around. You can add a couple more little bits into where the red is as well. Kind of neat. Like into the middle here too, around the snowman. So a fun little option. Gives it a bit more of that Christmas spirit feel as well. Okay. Pull it up just a little bit. It's a bit more of a, again, with a whimsical cheery look with the dots. So there's an idea. Or you can just keep it kind of like in the blue. Has more of a snow globe type of feel. So there's a lot of snow. You can go kind of crazy with the snow where it's really heavy in here. And it's mostly snowing into the center. All right, let's go back and finish up our bow and put the color that we want. We're going to take, so instead of just plain red, unless you have this type of red, it's actually a crimson red. So you can just take crimson red and you're good. Do not add more black to crimson red, not necessary. It's kind of true. Our Christmas red is very true to a red, but this red is actually more, it's kind of pinkish looking. So I'm going to take the smallest little dot of black. Just remember that small dot of black with a big giant scoop of red. That's all you need to give it that Christmas red, crimson red look. And then you're good to go. So look at that. Nice dark red. I'm just following the grooves. Giving it a nice rounded look. Okay, take more, do this side. Then let's do this side over here. So notice it's not very perfect at the moment because we are going to add, I'm just going to take pure red. You can still use the same dark red, but I'm just going to take a regular red without adding black, because then in the middle it sticks out a bit more, it's a bit brighter. But you can just add, you can just leave it lighter as is to give it that highlight. I want to wash this off, and then I'm going to add in more, just another dip of black into my red. So a small pea size. Let's take small pea size, and it's going to be pretty dark. See how dark that is? And with the darkness here, you can add more black if you need it darker. So I'm going to shape around this middle part. I feel like it's pretty important. You can use your detailed brush again. Gives it that crease. It's going to start making it look like there's a crease in here. And I'm going to follow, I'm just going to kind of dab around, giving it an outline, pulling it out from that crease. Just dab around here. And I can just follow that around, follow this around. You're just working and moving around the paint with the creases. There. So when I come from this corner here, sort of press, kind of follow it down here, just put a little bit of shadow on this bottom one. See right here, press, do the same thing, a little bit more onto this bottom one, less on the outside one. And you can always add more black. So that's just that's obviously very tame. It's also pretty wet, so working with wet paint on top of wet paint. But if you take more just straight black, this is just straight black now. If you're feeling daring and you want to do this, I put in more. Just more shaped around here. More coming from the sides. Think rounded and not doing like straight lines. You want to keep it kind of folded. And put some more black right down at the bottom, usually on the bottom parts, like in these little areas down here. Tends to be a bit more shadowed. Then I'm going to wash this off. So while this is still wet, it's good to just wash it off, take straight red, nothing special to the red, and you can soften it by blending it out with just straight red. And just your final little layer. It picks up a little bit of that black and it smooths it out. You're just pulling from it. And follow the grooves, that roundness, how it's folding around. Red up here. And then we can add white highlights. Probably detailed brush is good. For your white highlights, I didn't blend. I mean, you can blend, but I didn't really blend. I just went that, see a little swipe there. I went more shiny. It's kind of cool. It gives it a nice shiny spot. And then, you know, like up here, not on the very edge, but like within where most of the red is, not really touching the black. Little streaks of white. Do some towards that center and go above some of the black to give it a bit of a pop. And maybe on the outside of these parts. All right, I think that's good. Maybe one little one in here. Yeah, I think I'll just leave that. Looks a bit shiny. Not that it has to be shiny, but I think shine is fun. And just remember the red technique, just take red and pull off anything that you don't want to be too white. But I like the little shine that's added. And then of course, sign your painting. Do your last little touches. You can put in more twigs to fill up some of the space. Maybe you need to fill in more things. More final last minute touches with some dark brown. Little squiggly lines. That can be added in. So final touches and then that's it. Okay, so hopefully you had fun painting along with me. Just really hard to stop, so just know when to stop. And yeah, sign your painting, show it off on our Facebook page if you want to, and just go to groups, go to our support group or the acrylic one. You can show off what you did, different interpretations and additions that you put in, or maybe didn't want to put in, but maybe you'll paint along with me again sometime. We have lots of paintings coming up and we've already taught, so you can check it out. And you can check out our website, artistpaletterm.com, and see some free events and also some Zoom events. We also teach online through Zoom. Thanks for joining. Bye, guys.